This is Jess with Local Music Somewhere, and you're listening to rBeatz Radio. Hey guys, thanks for joining us again for another episode of Local Music Somewhere. I'm Jess with rBeatz, and today I'm in St. Petersburg, Florida at the iconic venue Jannus Live with Rob Douglas, who is the venue buyer and has been the venue buyer and operator here for over 40 years. Despite changes of hands and ownership, he's had this whole thing up and running, and I'm so excited for you to hear his story about how it all began. So let's kick it off.
I went into a theater complex, if you will. It was a combination hotel, restaurant, and it had a 500 to 750 cap theater. I went in there one day looking for a place to have a party. It turns out I knew some of the people that were working there, and they told me that the new ownership was trying to figure out what to do with the rooms that they had. They had a 250-seat nightclub, and they had a 500 to 750-seat theater. And at the time, they were doing Las Vegas-style shows. The whole purpose of the place was to sell timeshare condo units to, people from Idaho or whatever. So they were running Vegas-style stuff through there, like Phyllis Diller, Frankie Lane, Milton Berle, this kind of stuff. So that was going on in one room while I was DJing in the smaller room, the 250 cap room. But things changed as time went on, and they came to me and said, have you got any ideas about what we might do in this larger venue? Because the way they were doing it, they were doing 7 to 8 shows a week, Monday through Saturday. I think we were dark on Sundays. But I said, well, instead of doing that, why don't we look at doing some one-nighters and see what happens? Mm-hmm. So we had a 500 cap room there. They agreed to do it. We were doing 2 shows a night. And I happened to get a phone call one day from a very good friend of mine named John Valentino, who was working for a company called Phantasma. And we had handled their ticketing, so we knew each other. And he was just cold calling people, trying to find other venues for the work that they did. And so I pick up the phone one day, and it's him, and he's like, Rob, what are you doing there? And I told him what I was doing. He goes, well, you want to do some shows? I'm like, yeah, let's do some shows, So the first show we did was a one-night, 2-show stand with the Jeff Lorber Fusion, which was a fusion jazz act that spawned Kenny G into the world. Oh, he was the saxophone player in the band that time, but he was going by his full name.
Okay.
He hadn't abbreviated his last name yet. So the management and ownership saw that, 2 sold-out shows, and they're like, well, maybe we should continue this. So we did for quite a while until legal problems came up that forced the closure of the entire complex. There was just battle between ownership that really had nothing to do with me. But in that same complex, we were doing the concerts. I had a comedy club. I had a jazz club. We were flying in jazz greats from New York or wherever and playing with a local rhythm section, and that lasted for a couple of years. And then we had some of the finest players in the world. So that was a lot of fun. Wow. But anyway, that finally came to an end. So I was out wandering around looking for another place to do shows. And I found a couple of small venues here and there, but I had been aware of this place, Jannus, which had been occasionally used by a couple of guys. One guy used to do a thing he called Reggae in the Rain, because every time he did a show, it rained. And then another guy did a lot of hard rock stuff. He was affiliated with 98 Rock, which was a hard rock station. So I was aware of that place, and I came down here and I looked at it, and it had no infrastructure to speak of. The back walls that are out there now weren't even there. I did my first show there, and it went well. And finally, after having done 3 or 4 shows here, the owners of the property at that time said, hey, what do you think about, doing this all the time?
Yeah.
I said, well, yeah, it depends on the deal. Let's see what we can do. So that was 40 years ago, and been here ever since. And one of the things that I've tried to do in this venue is sort of remain neutral, sort of like Switzerland. I don't fight against Live Nation. I don't fight against AEG. I don't fight against LNE. I have we have the dates, and we let them fight over it. Mm-hmm. And then when they come to us, we sell the liquor, But that doesn't mean that we don't do our own shows, because we do. We just, the larger stuff that'll put 2,000 people in here, are generally brought to us by those entities. So it's been going on that way for quite a while. We're probably in our third ownership transition, and this fellow that owns it now, Jeff Knight, he's been here since about 2009. He's the one that did the most with the place, because my stage, you can go on YouTube and you can see old shows that we did here where the stage was covered with like a circus tent.
Okay.
The roof was a canvas roof. It was A-frame in appearance with support poles right through the middle, guy wires, and I don't know how people didn't hang themselves on them. But so he's the one that came in here, and he's the one that sunk the money into it, that brought it up to this century.
Yeah.
Or at least the last century. But
so what keeps you, coming back? Obviously, there's something that you're getting maybe creatively out of all of it.
Money.
So we're good at making the money, huh?
Well, here's the thing. When I started doing this, I worked in a record store, Tyrone Mall, for 10 years, and then I went out and I became a club DJ when disco was, and I remember thinking when I was the building doesn't exist anymore, but it used to be called the Cheyenne Social Club down on 34th Street. And I remember thinking it was a good sized room. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I was, playing whatever. Boy, I would love to. I want to bring George Benson in here, and do a show with George Benson. Or I want to bring, at that time I was deeply into jazz, but I was playing, what the popular music was to fill a dance floor and sell liquor. So I'd always had an idea of wanting to have something to do with that, and be responsible for bringing to this area things that I thought I would never be able to see, because no one else was bothering. So that's what led me down the path, and one thing led to another. When I finally got a hold of that 500 cap room at Tierra Verde, and I had made the connections that I had made in the ticketing business.
Right.
I was like, okay, well, here's that opportunity.
Yeah. So
for a very long time, out of that 45 years, every show was a new show and very exciting, and I had the opportunity to be booking people who I admired and was interested in, and fortunately enough for me, so were other people. I could starve to death if it just did nothing but what I liked. But
yeah, that's true.
So I try to keep an open mind about other things and keep my fingers on the pulse of whatever at some level. But it's been a long time now. It's been a very long time. And music has changed, crowds have changed, zeitgeist has changed. It's a different world now. And, so, I do it now, and occasionally there'll be something that Live Nation or AEG puts in here that, that was good. I really enjoyed that. And other times I'm like, there's a guy in a banana suit dancing around on the stage to a DJ, and 2,000 people are going nuts. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to dinner. It's like, right. I just don't get it. You know? But then I'm an old man now.
Well, it's so complicated. I think there's just so many angles when it comes to promotion. And like you said, it's an ever-changing industry. And I think about the musicians a lot. The program that we do is kind of to educate independent musicians and, from the ground up and all. So when you look at it from that perspective, like the musicians that want to get booked on to places like this, like what does that world kind of look like for you? What's that process?
Well, it isn't as... It isn't as freewheeling as it once was. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
There was a time in the 80s when I joined up with a fellow named Tony Refugiato and another guy, his partner, Dave Unley, who owned a promotion company called No Clubs. And they specialize in more, hardcore punk and things of that nature. And I was still doing more mainstream stuff and older stuff and whatever the case may be. But my point is, to answer your question, back then, we were asked almost every single time we put something together to find a local opener or two.
Yeah.
There was an opportunity back in those days to say so-and-so, hey, you've been playing in my bar over here.
Yeah.
Because I did have this bar behind the bigger room, which held, 300 to 400 people. And, it was kind of like a nice proving ground.
Yeah.
And when the right headliner came along on the larger stage, we could say, okay, you guys,
right,
you're the opening act. And we know that they'd go out there and hustle and try to sell tickets for us. And their friends would all want to come see them and that kind of stuff. That's gone. That doesn't exist anymore. What happens now is these tours come together and are announced fully formed. Mm-hmm. They have, if they're going to have any opener or multiple openers, they already have them. And usually it's a combination of people that are paying to play or people who are agency mates that have the same management, the same agency, same record label.
Yeah.
So, they're using the headliner as a vehicle to push attention to the younger acts that are with them.
Rob, thank you so much for talking with us today. It was really great meeting you. I'm Jess. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch y'all next time.
Thanks as always for tuning into rBeatz Radio. Search for more local music somewhere on rBeatz.com and follow our social media for highlighted artists as we travel with #LocalMusicSomewhere.